In the heart of Papua's tangled swamps and dense mangrove jungles, one of America's most privileged young men disappeared, an heir to the Rockefeller dynasty, swallowed by mystery, leaving behind nothing but rumors of cannibalism, cover-ups, and silence. Michael Clark Rockefeller was born in 1938, the youngest son of Nelson Rockefeller, a man destined to become governor of New York and later the vice president of the United States. Michael had every privilege: wealth, education at Harvard, connections stretching into the highest levels of power. But unlike many heirs, Michael wasn't interested in finance or politics. He was fascinated by art and anthropology, especially the art of cultures untouched by the modern world. By the late 1950s, Michael had joined an expedition into Dutch New Guinea, today's Papua, Indonesia. The region was still under Dutch colonial control, but the land itself belonged to the Asmat people, a tribe living in isolation, whose identity revolved around intricate wood carvings, ritual, and a violent tradition of headhunting and cannibalism. Outsiders often called them savages, but their art carried a raw power. Michael became captivated. In 1958, only 3 years before Michael arrived, Dutch colonial officers had raided an Asmat village, killing several men during a violent encounter. The wounds were fresh, and the resentment among the Asmat ran deep. To them, the Dutch represented intrusion, domination, and humiliation. Michael Rockefeller, though young and enthusiastic, stepped into this landscape at a volatile time. On November 17, 1961, Michael and Dutch anthropologist René Wassing set out on a 40-foot dugout canoe, accompanied by 2 local guides. They were navigating the mouth of the Betst River, headed toward remote villages to collect carvings. But the sea turned rough. By the next day, about 12 miles from shore, their canoe capsized. The 2 local guides swam off for help, leaving Michael and René clinging to the overturned craft through the long tropical night. By dawn, exhaustion set in. Michael, restless and determined, made a decision that would echo in history. He tied empty gasoline cans to his waist as makeshift floats and looked at the distant shore. "I think I can make it," he told René before sliding into the churning water. Wassing watched him go, watched him disappear into the swells, and never saw him again. 3 days later, Dutch rescuers found Wassing, alive but shaken. What followed was one of the largest search efforts in colonial history. Planes, helicopters, ships, hundreds of personnel scouring the coast and jungle. For weeks, they searched. But nothing surfaced: no body, no clothing, no trace of Michael Rockefeller. Officially, he was declared drowned. But the silence was louder than the verdict. Because in villages along the shore, stories began to spread. Missionaries working with the Asmat later recorded whispered confessions, villagers saying a white man had swum ashore, exhausted, and been killed. Some said his body was dismembered and consumed in a ritual act of vengeance, an offering to balance the blood lost in 1958 when Dutch soldiers killed their kin. One missionary noted that Dutch officials, upon hearing the rumors, warned him to keep quiet, that exposing the truth would undermine colonial authority and embarrass both the Dutch and the Rockefellers. For decades, those rumors lingered in the shadows. Then, in the early 2010s, journalist Carl Hoffman retraced Rockefeller's path for his book Savage Harvest. He uncovered missionary letters, Dutch records, and Asmat oral histories, all circling the same chilling conclusion: Michael had not drowned. He had reached the shore, only to fall victim to centuries-old cycles of retribution. Hoffman wrote, "The Asmat say they did it. To believe otherwise, you have to work harder than to accept the obvious." The Dutch colonial government had every reason to silence the story. In 1961, their grip on New Guinea was already slipping. Indonesia was demanding control of the territory. If news spread that a Rockefeller heir had been killed, and possibly eaten, by the very people the Dutch claimed to govern, it would have been an international humiliation. Suppression was the easier path. Other theories persist. Some maintain Michael simply drowned, dragged down by exhaustion, swallowed by currents, or attacked by crocodiles or sharks that infested those waters. It is the simplest explanation, but weakened by the haunting absence of a body. Another fringe idea suggests Michael may have survived and even lived among the Asmat, choosing anonymity in an alien world. But no credible evidence ever supported this. Most historians dismiss it outright. Instead, the most enduring possibility is both horrific and tragically plausible: that Michael Rockefeller became a victim of colonial revenge, a symbol caught in the crossfire of two worlds. His twin sister, Mary, later spoke of the lifelong wound left by his disappearance. For her, closure never came. For the Asmat, Michael may live on not as an individual, but as part of the mythic cycles of balance and violence that define their world. And so the mystery remains. Did Michael Rockefeller vanish beneath the waves? Or was he claimed by the jungle and its people, in a story that power and politics conspired to bury? The truth likely lies hidden in Papua, in the silence of the Asmat, and in records never meant to be seen. Where are you watching the video? Comment below, and if you like the video, please subscribe and like the channel. An American tycoon who built an empire from silk walked into a Malaysian jungle on a sunny afternoon and vanished without leaving a single trace. Jim Thompson was 61 years old when he disappeared. He had already lived more than one life by that point. Born in Delaware, educated at Princeton, trained as an architect, and then drafted into service during the Second World War, he became an operative for the OSS, the wartime intelligence service that later evolved into the CIA. After the war, when many men of his age and privilege settled into careers and families, Thompson charted a different course. He moved to Thailand, where he fell in love with the culture and saw something others had overlooked. The traditional silk weaving of Thailand, once a declining art, captured his imagination. With an instinct for design and an eye for opportunity, he built a business that revived the dying craft and introduced it to the world. By the 1950s, his company was supplying silk to Parisian fashion houses and Broadway costumers. When Hollywood released The King and I in 1956, the production's lavish silk costumes bore his mark. He became a celebrity in Bangkok society, known as the Silk King, admired for his taste and envied for his fortune. He built a house filled with Asian antiques, entertained diplomats, and mingled with artists, but he remained an enigmatic figure, private, a little restless, never quite belonging entirely to one world. In March of 1967, Thompson joined friends for a holiday in the Cameron Highlands of Malaysia. The cool mountain climate and rolling green hills had long attracted expatriates and wealthy travelers seeking relief from the tropical heat. Thompson was staying at a place called the Moonlight Bungalow, a rustic retreat surrounded by dense jungle and winding trails. On Easter Sunday, March 26th, he went out for a walk in the early afternoon. It was a clear day, and he set off alone, leaving behind his cigarettes and lighter, as though he expected only a short stroll. When dinner came that evening and he still hadn't returned, his companions grew concerned. At first, they thought perhaps he had stopped to rest, or wandered off the path. But as the night deepened and no sign of him appeared, alarms set in. The following morning, authorities were notified, and what followed was one of the largest search efforts in Malaysian history. Police, soldiers, Orang Asli trackers from the indigenous communities, British Gurkhas on leave, volunteers, dogs, and even helicopters scoured the highlands. Hundreds of people combed the jungle, calling his name, examining ravines and streams. Clairvoyants and spiritualists were even consulted when conventional means failed. The search went on for days, then weeks, and yet not a single trace of Jim Thompson was ever discovered. No footprints, no clothing, no bones, no belongings. It was as if the jungle had swallowed him whole. That total absence of evidence is what makes his disappearance so haunting. Thompson was fit, strong, and experienced. He had spent years trekking in Southeast Asia and was no stranger to the outdoors. The Cameron Highlands, while covered in thick undergrowth, were not considered impassable wilderness. Travelers regularly hiked those trails. It seemed impossible that he could vanish without leaving even a scrap behind. Over the years, theories multiplied. The most straightforward is that he simply met with accident, that he lost his way, slipped down a ravine, or fell prey to the dangers of the jungle. Tigers still prowled the area in the 1960s, and snakes or insects could have been deadly. But critics point out that accidents leave evidence. Bones eventually resurface, clothing is found, remains are stumbled upon. Decades have passed, and nothing ever came to light. Others believe he was abducted or murdered. Rumors circulated about robbery or revenge, whispers that his wealth and notoriety had drawn the wrong kind of attention. Some suggested disgruntled locals or even business rivals may have plotted against him. The story is complicated by his past life as an OSS agent. The Cold War was raging in Southeast Asia at the time. Thailand was a key ally of the United States, and Malaysia had its own insurgencies to contend with. Some speculate that Thompson's disappearance was not an accident at all but an assassination, or a kidnapping linked to intelligence services. To those who favor this theory, his past connections to espionage make him an easy target for conspiracy. There are stranger ideas too. Some have wondered if he staged his own vanishing, weary of fame or burdened by personal troubles. No evidence supports this, but Thompson's aura of mystery invites speculation. Others point to local sightings. Villagers claim to have seen a foreign man walking calmly along nearby trails around the time he vanished. The reports never led anywhere, but they add another layer of unease. If he was seen alive, why was he never found again? Years later, bones discovered in the region briefly stirred interest, but forensic analysis could never confirm them as his. In 1974, 7 years after his disappearance, a court in Thailand declared him legally dead. By then, his silk company had been sold off, and his Bangkok home was transformed into a museum. Still open today, filled with Thai art and antiques he collected, a physical reminder of the man who disappeared into the unknown. What remains is the silence. A jungle that never gave back what it may have taken. A man whose life intersected with war, commerce, art, and power, but whose final chapter ended in shadows. Was Jim Thompson swallowed by the forest, claimed by chance and misfortune? Or was he taken by forces tied to his past, the unseen networks of power that thrived in secrecy during the Cold War? His empire of silk endured, but his fate remains tangled in a web of rumor and silence. Where are you watching the video? Comment below, and if you like the video, please subscribe and like the channel. A legendary explorer, his son, and their companion vanished deep within the Amazon, leaving behind whispers of lost cities, hostile tribes, and a mystery unsolved for nearly a century. Colonel Percy Harrison Fawcett was one of the most famous explorers of his age. Born in 1867, he grew into a soldier, a surveyor, and a geographer who thrived in some of the most unforgiving places on Earth. He charted jungles where no maps existed, forged rivers where Europeans had never traveled, and survived dangers that would have ended most lives. His courage and eccentricity made him a figure of fascination, admired by fellow adventurers and novelists alike. Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, even based The Lost World on Fawcett's tales of dinosaurs and ancient creatures lurking in South America. But beyond the legends, Fawcett carried an obsession. He believed the Amazon hid something extraordinary, a lost civilization more advanced than anything Europeans thought possible. He called it simply Z. His conviction wasn't born from fantasy but from fragments of history. He had pored over an old Portuguese manuscript from 1753 known as Manuscript 512, which described a ruined city deep in Brazil. Stone arches, temples, and walls etched with mysterious symbols. Combined with indigenous stories of great cities hidden in the forest, Fawcett became certain there was truth behind the myths. He spoke of Z with almost religious fervor. To him, it was proof that the Amazon was not just wilderness but the cradle of civilizations forgotten by the outside world. His peers mocked him, dismissing the jungle as too harsh for advanced societies. But Fawcett was undeterred. In 1925, after years of preparation, he launched what he believed would be his greatest and final expedition. His companions were few: his son Jack, just 22, and Jack's close friend Rolly Rimmel, 21. Fawcett deliberately kept the party small, believing large expeditions invited disaster by provoking local tribes. With minimal equipment, mules, and provisions, they set off from the city of Cuiabá in early May. 4 weeks, they trudged deeper into Mato Grosso, through suffocating heat, clouds of insects, and rivers that could drown in an instant. On May 29, 1925, Fawcett sent a letter home from a place he called Dead Horse Camp. In it, he reassured his wife Nina that they were healthy and optimistic. It was calm, hopeful, tinged with the quiet confidence of a man who believed he was on the brink of discovery. That letter was the last anyone ever heard from him. After Dead Horse Camp, the trio pressed further east, toward the Xingu River basin. Then, silence. No messages. No sightings. No bodies. The jungle swallowed them whole. Months passed, then years, and the world grew restless. Newspapers around the globe published updates, spinning the mystery into legend. Search expeditions were organized, dozens over the decades. Some were led by seasoned explorers, others by fortune hunters chasing headlines. Almost all ended in failure. Many searchers themselves vanished or died in the attempt, lost to disease, starvation, or the same tribes Fawcett had hoped to befriend. The jungle seemed to punish all who tried to unravel its secret. Rumors trickled back through the years. Indigenous tribes told stories of a tall foreigner passing through, accompanied by two younger men. The Kalapalo tribe later admitted that Fawcett's group had stayed near their village for several days. They remembered the trio moving on into dangerous territory beyond their lands. Beyond that point, their fate was unknown, but the Kalapalo suggested they may have been killed by hostile neighbors further east. Other stories were stranger. Some explorers claimed to have seen light-skinned chiefs ruling remote villages decades later, fueling speculation that Fawcett had survived and assimilated into tribal life. There were whispers that he had chosen to remain hidden, having found Z, or something close to it, and deciding never to return. Theories multiplied as the years stretched on. One held that the party died of natural causes: hunger, disease, or wild animals. The Amazon was merciless to outsiders, and without adequate supplies, they could have perished quickly. But if so, why was no trace ever found? Another theory insisted they were murdered, either as a reprisal for trespassing or as a tragic misunderstanding. Some suggested that rival treasure hunters might have killed them to keep whatever Fawcett was close to finding a secret. And then there was the romantic vision that Fawcett did not fail at all, that he found the fabled lost city of Z and chose to vanish into its mystery, perhaps to protect it from the outside world. For decades, this idea was dismissed as fantasy. Yet modern archaeology has given it a strange new credibility. Using satellite imaging and LiDAR, researchers have uncovered vast geometric earthworks, networks of roads, canals, and remnants of large settlements hidden beneath the forest canopy. These discoveries prove that complex civilizations once thrived in the Amazon, far more advanced than scholars of Fawcett's day ever imagined. In a way, his intuition was not madness, it was prophetic. Writers and historians continued to chase his ghost. David Grann's book The Lost City of Z brought Fawcett's obsession back into the spotlight, retracing his route, uncovering archival records, and speaking with tribes whose ancestors might have been the last to see him alive. Yet even Grann, with all modern resources, could not pierce the final veil. Nearly a century later, the fate of Percy Fawcett, Jack, and Raleigh remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in exploration. Did they fall to hunger, disease, or arrows in the night? Were they absorbed into an indigenous tribe, their names erased but their bloodlines perhaps living on? Or did they step into the very legend they sought, finding Z and vanishing into its myth? Did Percy Fawcett die in the unforgiving jungle, or did he finally reach the lost city he devoted his life to finding? The answer may still lie hidden beneath the Amazon's endless green canopy. Where are you watching the video? Comment below, and if you like the video, please subscribe and like the channel.